Frank, it's number 28. My first ever Jean-Claude Van Damme film, and probably my last, Sudden Death. Sudden Death is a 1995 action crime thriller directed by Peter Hyams, who also directed the sequel to 2001 called 2010, The Year We Make Contact. A relatively mediocre film that could have been better if it just was not related to 2001 in any way, shape, or form. He also directed Capricorn 1, which I thought was a piece of garbage, and Outland, which I actually think is really good. So this is my fourth Peter Hyams film, and like I said, my first Jean-Claude Van Damme film. Sudden Death stars Jean-Claude Van Damme, Powers Boothe, Raymond J. Barry, Dorian Harewood, Whitni Wright, and Ross Malinger. Sudden Death is the story of Darren McCord, a fire inspector for the city of Pittsburgh. His job is to be present at the Stanley Cup Finals game between the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Chicago Blackhawks. He decides to give his kids a little surprise by giving them tickets to go see the game. He goes over to his ex-wife's house where his kids are, and of course she yells at him for showing up, but ends up letting him take the kids anyway. Little does he or anybody else know that Powers Boothe is running a team of domestic terrorists who are going to hold the vice president hostage because the vice president is attending the game that night. They'll be holding the vice president hostage and negotiating billions of dollars in frozen funds, or else they're going to blow up the entire stadium and everyone in it. So the only person left to save the day is Jean-Claude Van Damme, the one-man wrecking crew. Your thoughts on Sudden Death are: one of the best Die Hard ripoffs. JCVD fights a woman in a penguin suit. Enough said. Okay, so when I watched this film, I did not consider it within the concept of being a Die Hard ripoff, which actually makes 100% sense and makes the general plot of the film, which kind of seemed ridiculous, to be a little bit more grounded in something else. I would say that the people who wrote this and produced this probably saw Die Hard and saw like The Last Boy Scout and were like, if we can combine Die Hard with like the directing style of like Tony Scott, then we'll have synergy. But alas, Sudden Death does not quite get there. We'll talk about that in a second. But actually, we'll talk about it right now. I don't know why I'm saying we'll talk about it in a second. We'll talk about it right now. This movie, I did not enjoy it at all. This was something that like I kind of plotted my way through. It feels like the not made as well cousin to a bunch of other films that are made better than it. So I didn't go through a Jean-Claude Van Damme phase. So when I watch these movies, all I see is the wooden acting, kickboxing, and doing whatever type of martial arts it is that he's doing. Yes, JCVD fights a woman in a penguin suit, and it is hilarious. It's one of the truly there's a couple of great moments in this film, and that is one of them. But my big problem with this film is honestly some of the stuff that just like doesn't make any sense to me at all. I mean, I know that the whole point is like Van Damme is supposed to be, a fire inspector, and he's like, his whole job is to be around the stadium, making sure that everything's going the way that it's supposed to be going. Okay, so why does he bring his kids there and then basically abandon them in two seats to fend for themselves? Like, that makes no sense. It's like, hey, I'm going to bring you to a hockey game, but I'm not going to be here because I got to go do my job. It's like, what was the point of that? I can tell you what the point is. It's like, it was just to have those kids sitting there. I think one of the things that also bugged me about the film was they go through this whole process of trying to make you understand that at some point in time, Van Damme's character was trying to save a life, and like he choked or he did something wrong, and the person ended up dying anyway. And that's why he is now, instead of being like a firefighter, which in this movie is apparently some like really big, like illustrious position, he is a fire inspector, which is apparently, compared to being a firefighter, like a nobody. I don't know how all that works in real life, but it just seemed like kind of overly dramatic in the movie. And they, like I said, they make this whole effort to try and explain to you that like he didn't accomplish his mission, or he choked or whatever the first time around, and like maybe he's going to do it again, but he doesn't really do it. I mean, he's sort of like, JCVD's his way through the whole thing, and he's just kicking ass left and right. So I just don't feel like some of the stuff that they set up at the beginning of the movie ever really gets followed through on, because he's just doing his Van Damme thing and kicking people's butts. Another thing that bothered me, and I know that this is a really small thing, but it's like, it's these logic lapses throughout the film where it's like a character gets killed, the character gets put into a bathroom stall, okay? Bathroom stalls doors open in, right? So they get put in the bathroom stall, they are dead, yet somehow this dead person manages to open the bathroom stall door so that they can then fall forward onto another character. That literally makes no sense. And there's a lot of stuff. I feel like, maybe there's not a lot, but I felt like there was more than enough of that kind of stuff happening in Sudden Death, where it's like just stuff that like logically would not happen, and you're like, what are these people thinking? Like they're literally just doing something just to like make something that looks cool, but then as a film goer, I'm sitting there going like, this logically makes no sense because it actually can't happen in reality. So I was in the middle of editing this video, and I realized that there was a ton of me just crapping all over this movie. I actually cut out over 5 minutes of me complaining about it because, truth be told, it's just not worth listening to. But with all that, I thought it might be really good to have a positive voice to balance some of this out. So I asked my buddy Jeremy Adams, who went through a JCVD phase when he was a kid, to write a little bit about it and help me to understand, and maybe whoever's watching this video to understand, why JCVD was so important to him as a kid and why he loved these movies. Because clearly I do not. So here's what he said. Jean-Claude Van Damme was different. When the muscles from Brussels, as he would affectionately come to be known as, exploded into my cinematic mind in 1988, it was all due to Bloodsport, the low-budget martial arts cult classic that dared to pull back the curtain on the infamous Kumite fighting competition. The movie was fun, set in an exotic locale, the fighting was exciting, and the lead star was fresh, hip, and could move like no other. Van Damme was different because he was compact, could do flips, splits, and most importantly, could pull off an array of aerial kicks. Arnold didn't do it, Stallone didn't do it, Bruce Willis didn't do it, Mel Gibson didn't do it, and Chuck Norris couldn't do it nearly as good. And to be honest, it wasn't because Van Damme's movies were great or actually good, it was all about the fighting, which again was different from all the other action star offerings at the time. And to a red-blooded American kid who lived in the middle of nowhere and craved exotic adventures of kicking butt, taking names, and getting the beautiful girl in the end, Van Damme checked all those boxes off with style and grace. All about the action. After Bloodsport, there was a string of entertaining Van Damme fight flicks like Cyborg, Death Warrant, Kickboxer, Lionheart, and Double Impact, where he played twins, a gimmick he would revisit in 1996's Maximum Risk. Those fueled his rise as one of the top stars on the action food chain, where he sat for several years. Yet, the thing that separated Van Damme from all the rest is what ultimately ended up knocking him down the action food chain in the mid to late 90s, as well as substance abuse problems. The fact that beyond the kicks, flips, and all the choreographed fighting, Van Damme's depth as an actor was shallow. Not to say he hasn't shown range. I'll argue that his best film, in my opinion, 1994's Time Cop, shows Van Damme as a beaten man who truly misses his deceased wife. And of course, in 2008's JCVD, Van Damme pretty much laid all his shortcomings on the line and somewhat kickstarted another chapter in his late career. Yes, it's purely nostalgic, but I fondly remember the late 80s and early 90s when Van Damme's star was bright and his offerings were fresh and exciting. A mystique that only added to the allure and fun gamble of going to the video store to see if they had a copy of his latest movie to rent. There was one scene that I really liked in there, and it was the scene where Van Damme is trying to hide from some of the terrorists. They've come after him, and he kind of like ducks into the Penguins' locker room, and the goalie for the Penguins had like gotten sick or something, so he's like in the locker room, he's like passed out, and Van Damme like finds all of his goalie gear, so he puts all this goalie gear on because then he can like get onto the ice and get across to the other side of the stadium without these guys seeing him. So he gets on the ice, and the coach is like, all right, you're in. So he goes over to the goal, and he's sitting there like just kind of flailing, essentially, like, because, you know, he doesn't know how to do that. And Chicago tries to make a shot, and he ends up catching it. And everybody's like amazed, and the announcers are like, you know, this is the best thing that this guy has done all season, and, you know, he's incredible, fighting the good fight with I think it was like 104-degree temperature or something like that. And so he like makes this amazing save or whatever. And then there's a point where it's established in the beginning where his daughter shows him like, I love you in sign language. And like after he catches the puck or whatever and makes a save, he looks up into the audience and he sees his son up there, and he like does the I love you sign language, and his son is like mind blown. He's like, wait, is that my dad? And then Van Damme immediately like goes up to the Chicago player, like grabs him by the shoulders, turns him around, and just like socks him across the face.
Oliver makes a little move out in front of the net. What's he doing?
Because that puts him in the penalty box where then he can sneak out. And that scene is so like ridiculous that it made me laugh, and that scene was the best time that I had in the entire movie, because he's just like, you know, what was it, like, I love you, wham, you know, it was even now I can't get over it. So but yeah, it just like it was just, I don't know, it was just kind of a dumb action movie. I've seen much better action movies. Die Hard is a better action movie. In the end, sudden death, not for me. But that's not to say that other people, you know, might not love it, or might love it, I guess is what I should say. You know, you're allowed to like whatever you like. That's the great thing about movies. If you like Jean-Claude Van Damme, if you like sudden death, great. If you don't, great. That doesn't bother me. In the words of the Big Lebowski, it don't matter to Jesus. All right, Frank, the next film on your list is number 29. It is the Cary Grant starring An Affair to Remember. This one should be interesting. I don't know that I've ever heard of An Affair to Remember, so we'll see what it's like. And then next up after that is Mad Monster Party. I am kind of looking forward to that one. They played that at the New Beverly, but unfortunately I was not able to get down there for that. I just had some other things on the 2 days that they were playing it, and they were only playing it one show per day, so had to skip out on that one. But yeah, thanks for watching, Frank. I'm glad that you're still tuning into these. I can't believe we're already up to number 28. It seems like I've been doing these for a long time, but at the same time, it's gone really fast, and I can't believe that we're already here. So anyway, leave a comment below, like, subscribe, all that stuff, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks a lot.